Well, yesterday there was a protest in Washington, D.C. and Capitol Hill by over 80 rabbis and activists, had a sit-in, and many of them were arrested. We're going to be joined by one of the rabbis who took part in that demonstration, Scott Perlow. He's the rabbi at the 6 and I Historic Synagogue in Washington, D.C. And joining us in the studio is Rabbi Susan Silverman, founder of the Sheltering Asylum Seekers, and of Komacha, a Jewish response to refugees. Susan, you have not been arrested yet on this issue, but you are leading a group that, in fact, is taking action that is going to defy the government. Tell us about it.
That's right. I hope it doesn't get that far. But if it does, if it gets to the point where the government actually does issue these decrees of deportation to asylum seekers here, we will take action, because the choice that the government is giving to these asylum seekers is either go away to your deaths or to being trafficked or go to prison indefinitely.
What action are you going to take?
So what action we're taking is we're giving them a third option. We're saying, come. I cannot believe the number of people who are responding to this. We are thousands of Israeli families, and we will be here for you, and you come and you live in our homes, and the government will have to come through us to take you.
Part of what's really interesting about the message and what you guys are doing in particular, part of the argument about what the Israeli government rather is doing, is that the Jewish state, that many of whom experienced the Holocaust, is doing something now that really defies its own history. You're sort of using the stories of the Holocaust to send that message. Explain that.
In the sense that I talked about Anne Frank as being a sort of an Anne Frank movement, although that's not what we're called officially, right? The Anne Frank movement. Why? Because people took great risk to hide people who otherwise would go to their deaths. Now, no one's going to go to their deaths in Israel. The Israeli government isn't proposing anything of that sort. But we know that when people are sent from here to other countries, that they are back on the refugee trail.
No guarantee of their safety.
Oh, yeah, absolutely no guarantee of their safety. In fact, they're at very, very great risk. And if we are sending them to these other countries, then we are complicit.
Okay, let's go to Washington and speak to Rabbi Scott Perlow. Scott, tell us what your group is doing, and tell us about that incident in the Capitol yesterday.
Kalev Nurit Shalom Uvracha. Yesterday we walked into the Russell Senate building, into the rotunda, and sat down, asking the Senate to pass a Clean Dream Act, a provision for the DACA recipients to be able to stay in the country, be productive citizens, as they have been up till now, and refuse to leave until that bill was passed or we were arrested. And the second part is what happened.
And what is your group, what are you trying to achieve? What is your goal there in terms of the immigration issue?
I think it's very similar to what Rabbi Silverman was saying before. We don't understand what the essential difference is between us and these people. Many of them have lived in the United States for exactly as long as I have, and the Torah teaches that before God, the immigrant and the citizen are exactly the same. So we can't quite understand what possible motivation, other than xenophobia, there is to get these actually wonderful, intelligent, productive group of nearly 800,000 people who are the backbone of a lot of our country, a lot of our society, a lot of our workforce out of this country.
Susan, tell me briefly, you are speaking to these migrants here in Israel, like you're saying, you've heard a lot of response to this project. What are they telling you about their concerns about this program, this sort of offer, though it's not really voluntary, to go off to a third country?
They're terrified. They know what it means. They know that they land in this third country, and right away they're back on the refugee trail. Right away they're headed to places like Libya with the hopes of getting to Europe, but actually being on literal auction blocks, slave auction blocks in Libya. This is what's awaiting them. These people came to us for safety. One of the reasons that I chose the name Anne Frank when we were thinking about this program is because there's an Eritrean refugee who read the diary of Anne Frank, translated it to Tigrinya, and came to Israel saying to himself, the people of Anne Frank will take care of me, they will protect me, and we should.
All right, Rabbi Susan Silverman and Rabbi Scott Perlow in Washington, stay with us. We're going to go out for a quick break. This conversation continues right here on The Rundown when we're back. An important conversation to have in 2015, all things considered, both in Washington and in Jerusalem. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
I'm David Schuster.
And I'm Shayna Stulin.
Join us on I-24 News for our show Crossroads.
We bring you a comprehensive
and engaging
look at the global news and opinions from the Crossroads of America.
Weeknights beginning at 6 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News. This week on Holy Land Uncovered. A special interview with Israeli Minister of Agriculture Uri Ariel following his initiative to break the long drought in the country with massive prayer. Also, we'll take a tour in the Arab village of Shfar'am, and we'll see a new exhibition which tackles life in the ultra-Orthodox cult, Lev Tahor. Join us Sunday, only on I-24 News.
Welcome back to The Rundown, and we're speaking with two rabbis who are active in the immigration issue. Joining us in studio, Rabbi Susan Silverman, founder of the Sheltering Asylum Seekers, and of Kamocha, a Jewish response to refugees. And from Washington, we have Rabbi Scott Perlow. And Rabbi Perlow, I'm going to play a bit of devil's advocate here now. How do you answer those who say, look, we have an administration that was voted into power in the United States in large part because of the tough stand it's taken on the immigration question, and a nation has the right to safeguard its borders and decide who comes legally?
I think that the government does have a right to decide who comes legally into its borders. But has the Trump administration considered that over 80% of Americans, or 80% of Democrats and over 70% of Republicans actually support keeping the Dreamers here? This isn't just a question of unfettered immigration. We could talk about that another time. What about the fact that the countries that some of these Dreamers are going to be sent back to are ones that they've never seen in their entire lives? These Dreamers are a special case, and ones that both left and right can agree on. Why isn't the Trump administration responding to that?
Susan, what would you say to the same question here? Because certainly that's the argument the Israeli government is making, that we are protecting our borders.
That is the argument. I mean, we have countless more numbers of people who are from other places who are here, maybe came legally and are now here illegally, or came illegally and we're not going after them. The African asylum seekers we're going after. A. B, yes, the government has a right to stake its claim. We have an obligation as people and as a Jewish nation to fight a claim that is going to send people to their deaths. We are not fulfilling our mission as a Jewish state, not even close. We have leaders who are quoting Haman, right? Eli Yishai said there's a people among you who do not follow your laws, talking about the African asylum seekers. That's what Haman said about the Jews. Pharaoh said they're growing in numbers and they will overcome us. That's literally what Netanyahu said. We're quoting the villains of our own historical stories.
Well, Rabbi Perlow, let me ask you, pick up on that point. Do you see this as a specifically Jewish issue in which, for example, the Jewish community or your congregation should be involved in taking on itself?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, at what point in time in history were Jews not exactly the kinds of people we're talking about? Longtime residents of the country searching for a home in which they were viewed by suspicion and possibly hatred for being different. It is so crazy that in the two countries in the world that are built specifically upon immigration, the modern state of Israel and the United States of America, that people would turn a hateful eye towards immigrants. Who are we in either of these countries if not immigrants? I can't agree with Rabbi Silverman more.
Scott, I just want to ask you, at a time during the Trump administration where there was obviously such pushback against immigration, there was just a briefing about that from the White House yesterday. Who do you feel your allies are in Washington in this cause?
Well, I wish that we had stronger voices here. I think that somehow or another, the right-wing populism that has seeded this country has actually made a lot of Republican senators and congresspeople who do in their hearts know that immigration does need to be fixed and has to be a huge part of what makes this country good and fixable, but they're just too afraid to say something. So we're actually waiting for those leaders to stand up. I was heartened to see the way that Lindsey Graham and others were searching for a bipartisan compromise. But we know that even a nuanced, thoughtful approach to immigration will immediately be seized upon by the far right and the alt-right in this country, and people are a little too scared of their venom and their vitriol to do what's right today.
And Susan, what about here in Israel? Where are you finding support from official circles outside of, obviously, the government?
So there are many amutot, many nonprofits that are working on behalf of asylum seekers. Everybody is coming together around this, many organizations. We have had such a response from the public that it's overwhelming. We can't handle it all. We immediately raised money so that we can now hire a full-time director of this program, because there's become such a huge response of people who say, count me in for my home and my family to shelter somebody, and from many people who are parts of larger communities, rabbis and others, who say, not only can you count me in, but I'm going to bring my entire community into this.
All right. Well, an important conversation, as we said, and as Scott said, while waiting for leaders to stand up, the rabbis and activists are standing up both in Israel and the United States. Great to have you here telling your story, Rabbi Susan Silverman and Rabbi Scott Perlow in Washington. Thank you both very much for being with us, sharing your activism.